Hi again, it's Nikki from SMR Congress 2014 here in Nice, and right now I am joined with Geeta from The Third Eye and Sumeli from MTV in India, both from India.
Hi. Hi.
So, you guys gave a really wonderful, really interesting presentation on the endear philosophy. I will be very sure to call it a philosophy and not a method.
Thank you.
And it was really, really interesting to me on a lot of levels. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is, do you foresee, I know maybe the question might sound like I'm treating it like a method, but do you foresee this philosophy being able to work on a global level? Do either of you have any experience of working with this in other markets outside of India?
We haven't worked on it in other markets outside India, but I think it's a philosophy, and it's a philosophy based on a human truth. Mm-hmm. So I believe that it can work anywhere in the globe. Because if you empower somebody and you give them a sense of autonomy and purpose, I'm not sure why it shouldn't work in any other market. Mm-hmm. Which is what philosophies are all about, really.
Right.
To me, actually, it has implications much beyond the research as a discipline. We have used endear as a philosophy also for a lot of marketing campaign that we do. The recent one being MTV Rock the Vote. It was driving the general elections in 2014 that just concluded right now in India. And we did the entire thing, the entire part of the endear, the ENDER. And that really, really worked for us because that generated a lot of participation, a lot of love for what we did, because people saw the resolution that's coming out of it. Because that's probably, to me, something that people actually miss out when they do studies and when they do campaigns and when they actually communicate. Anything that goes out in terms of communication, as long as the youth actually want people to come back and tell them why they engaged with them. They feel good about it. They feel empowered. It's probably, like she said, it's a real life.
To me, it is a philosophy. It is about a fundamental motivation that human beings have. They want to contribute. They want to be part of a larger process. And I think for the research community, I think it's about time we stop treating them as respondents.
Yeah.
And and participants in a study. I think they're partners and they're also shapers of. Finally we're going to sell to them, and we're going to market to them, and they are going to shape the outcomes. So the more empowered they are, the better the outcomes will be for us, even in a research, framework. So I think it makes sense to use it across markets, across audiences.
Like, don't tag them with a number code of the questionnaire that we have. Let's just treat them as an individual because they have emotions. Let's just respect it.
Sure. So a lot of what you just said hits like a personal spot for me and a lot of researchers, because I know a lot of us right now are trying to find ways to bring the human element back into research because we feel like it's gotten a little bit lost. So thinking about that, what do you think about this endear philosophy when the subject is not as exciting? Because this has been something that quite a lot of us have been trying to figure out. It can be a little bit easier to get people engaged if you're talking to them about voting, about elections, or about music or things that they're passionate about. But what if you wanted to get people's feedback on things like their favorite brand of toilet paper? How do you recommend using that idea?
So if I was to tell you what you use versus I was to ask you that you could shape the outcome of this toilet paper, I'm asking a simple question. If I said, how many times do you use this toilet paper, you'll give me an answer. But if I told you that I need to ask you all these questions because you will shape the larger outcome of this, you will get inspired to contribute much more than just your usership data. So I think it really depends on what your starting point is. And like I said, endear as a philosophy becomes a starting point that can be used for something even monotonous or banal. I believe that. I believe it really depends on how you contextualize something. What is the context you give it?
I would actually go a little bit further than what you said. It's much more important to put an endear if it's very monotonous a study, because it would get them that more interested in it. Because the moment you actually tell them that this is how I'm going to use your response to deliver this kind of a thing, it's very simple, when we work as partners and when there's a brief that's going out, it's very important for me to say how I'm going to use the results, because otherwise we would get a solution that probably is great from the partner's perspective, who has put in a lot of hours of work to do it, and we can't use it because that's not the form that we want it in, right? Now, so it's going back to a very basic truth that if you tell them that this is how it's going to be used, if you give them the democracy of actually having their veto and the vote power into it, if you actually make it interesting and new for them, not new in terms of the product per se, because there are only X number of products that are existing, but in how probably they can use it. They can come up with ideas that can be brilliant for
I think you need to really, in just one line, move it from usership to ownership.
Yeah.
I mean, you want the toilet paper,
Yeah.
don't you? In some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's not just about using, it's about owning it. It's about owning that whole space. It's about saying, I contribute, I make a difference. And that's what, to me, that's what will shift. And maybe that's a perspective we need to relook at as marketers.
And what might you suggest for researchers who are looking to adopt this kind of philosophy, but maybe they feel, for whatever reason, like they can't necessarily tell respondents how their responses will have an impact? Say, for example, there's some healthcare or pharmaceutical work being done, and it's relatively secret, or there's copyright things, it's very confidential. What do you suggest for how to approach
Well,
that?
I'm saying that, you need to talk to the client and etch a kind of purpose. It doesn't need to be a very detailed purpose. But somewhere you need to get the respondent, like I said, to partner you rather than just to participate in it. And you can always work out the modalities of what that partnership should be. But it really is about partnering them to build something more meaningful. You don't need to give the details. I'm sure, finally, even if I told you that what you said and did was important to me, and the way I said it to you, I would engage you. I don't need to give you the details. I'm sure there are ways in which one can do it. To be honest, we've used it now and we believe in it and we believe it can be used and it can be taken to other markets and to other consumers.
Yeah.
And I think, again, the proof of the pudding will lie in testing it in other markets.
Okay, great. The other thing I wanted to ask about is I really like your idea that you said at the end of the presentation on how we really need to shift in thinking about philosophies instead of about methodologies. Have you seen this in any other, in any other area, any other methods that you've kind of transformed into a more way of thinking?
I think I've seen it happen in human resources.
Okay.
When you look at HR,
Yeah.
I've seen lots of corporates now moving from methodology to philosophy. So, they used to look at performance appraisal systems, they would look at how they hired. Suddenly they recognize that those things don't work because they're too linear and they're too, they straitjacket people. So they've started looking at philosophies and it's really working there. In companies that do that, Google for instance has very low attrition because it's based on a philosophy, it's not based on a methodology.
Even for example, the entire content creation space where you basically can create content with them, for them, you're letting them create content, letting them give feedback to the organization, etc. The other thing that I've also noticed things changing a lot is also probably social media where you actually listen in. It's a very non-intrusive way of doing it. But if you can listen in and actually empower them with this whole endear philosophy, then they can actually do much more for you, because otherwise you're very passively just picking up stuff which is there, and there are a lot of things that goes unwritten in those lines. And the moment you actually make them feel that they are making a difference in your life, right, in the brand's life, and they do care for brands. I mean, they definitely do care for brands, and they do care. And more importantly, they happen to have a say. I think somebody somewhere actually said that I would want to have a say, and if you are talking to me, why wouldn't I talk back to you? Because that's what I want to do. I want to communicate, I want to connect, and I want to collaborate. And India does all of that.
Okay. Two last questions for you. Obviously the theme of this conference has a lot to do with inspiration. So talk to me about what kind of inspires you guys in general.
To me, actually, anything that's new and disruptive for me is inspiring. When I was younger, I was a rebel. Now, of course, age is not just a demographic. But anything, to me, also pushing the boundaries, challenging myself is inspiring. Stepping out of my comfort zone is inspiring. Which is why, as a researcher, I can take a leap and look at philosophy and not methodology and be inspired by it. So for me, that kind of stuff inspires me. I'm not sure I can still climb a mountain, but I'd like to. So travel inspires me all the time because it is necessarily about stepping out of your comfort zone and doing new stuff.
For me, what really inspires is when you create something new, when you create something which has a very vague starting point. I really love to work, in terms of profession, I really like to work on projects which has very vague briefs, because that leaves a lot for you to put in place over there that actually tests your knowledge. Like you said, that really pushes the boundary. That's really tests your ability to unlearn and learn and do that really quickly, because that's very, very challenging for me. Rather than routine and monotony, I guess being with millennials, we have acquired some traits of them.
I think so.
So yeah.
Okay, great. And the last question is, obviously it's the first day, you guys have presented, so you've probably been a little bit busy, but what's your feeling about this particular event? How have you guys been received in Nice, and what are your thoughts on the Congress?
I think it's great. I think they've done a really good job in terms of organizing it. I think the papers are fantastic and they're really inspiring. It's a great effort, and I think as a research community, again, to me it's inspiring because you guys are constantly pushing the boundaries. You're pushing us to think differently, and I think that's great.
What to me is really unique and different is that most of the researches that got presented, most of the presentations are not divided into qualitative, online research, quantitative. They have a mix of everything. They're focused to a particular outcome which is just directed at saying that I want to understand this set of target group, how do I understand? So it's again not focusing on do I put in method A or method B, it's a whole assortment of all of that. It's again a nice mix of cocktail that gets presented to you and you really like the taste of it. So yeah, that's very, very interesting for me because that's a new learning for me of also seeing that how different methods can be mixed together and how you can derive interesting insights when you look at A, B, C, D and you put a nice concoction of that.
Great.
It's a great place.
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
Yeah.
An amazing
Nice is
weather.
nice.
It's a good location for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks, ladies. We
Thanks,
appreciate it.
thank you so
And thanks,
much.
you
Thank
guys.
Bye, thank you.